Hi, my name is James and I'm a game designer, or at least I was. Now I'm not really sure what I am. Back in 2024, I lost my job in the games industry when the studio I worked at was closed by its parent company, which at this point in history was a very common story. Since then, I've been looking for work while spending time on various projects, the biggest of which has been my journey to learn to code in Unity. When I first lost my job, I knew that I wanted to continue to develop despite being out of work, and I found myself at a crossroads. I knew that there were two things that would help me to succeed in the future, and I only had time and patience for one of them. I could either spend my time learning the Unreal Engine and, more specifically, blueprints, or I could learn to code. At this time, I had almost 10 years experience working in Unity, but no real coding experience. And having worked in other visual scripting tools, I felt that were I to join a company that used blueprints, I'd pick it up fairly quickly. Which, incidentally, is an opinion that I learned in the last year that the industry does not share. In the end, I made the decision to try and learn C#, the primary programming language of Unity, for two main reasons. One, because I'm already familiar with Unity, and two, because knowing how to code would be a skill set that could be transferred across multiple softwares, not just Unity, while Blueprints was only valuable for Unreal. My plan was to use this downtime to create something that I would publish by the end of the year, which I could potentially use to jumpstart a small studio, or at least fund my own lifestyle. It was going to be a challenge, sure, but I was pretty positive I could do it. After all, I was a games industry veteran with, 15 years experience. I had to be able to do it on my own, right? Right? Since it's been over a year since I started, and this video isn't titled My Indie Publishing Journey, you might be able to guess that unfortunately, my plans didn't go as I expected. Back when I started, I made the same mistake that every new solo developer makes. I went too big. My plan was to build out a Metroidvania while simultaneously learning and eventually release it at a low cost on Steam. And to be fair, it went fairly well to start with. I was following a YouTube tutorial series, and while it wasn't perfect, I did get the bare bones working. I had some decent levels with pretty okay art, there were character animations and a few abilities. I even worked out that at a £10 price tag, I only needed to sell 8,500 copies to earn what I did per year in my previous role, which didn't seem out of the realm of possibility, especially when you consider that success in my previous roles meant multiple millions of installs. The problems came when I started trying to go off script with the tutorials, and I realised that while I had learned a lot about the kinds of things that were possible, I hadn't learned how to code, just how to copy someone. I later learned that this was called tutorial hell, but at the time I just thought it was called being bad. That said, it was also a fun and interesting project, a 2D pixel art side-scrolling Metroidvania about a teddy bear who had to save their assigned child from the monsters under the bed. Also, it was called Get Stuffed, which really amused me. So if I hadn't had a flow-breaking epiphany that I'll mention in a minute, I might have just carried on and slowly worked through these problems. Maybe even become a coder one of these days, but who knows. Alas, it was not to be. As I said, my plan was to build this game and publish it on Steam, but when I was nearing the end of the first of 15 biomes, after 3 months, I had a realization. I was betting too much on too much time. Yes, I might be able to drag the game kicking and screaming to the finish line if I kept working at it. Yes, I might have even made something resembling a game, and a fun one at that. But it was going to take too long, and it didn't leave me any room for failure. Assuming I kept at the same pace, which I wouldn't have because I would have needed to get more complicated and learn more as we went, it wouldn't be completed for almost 4 years, which I did not have the money to wait for. Even if I did, it then would have had to succeed, or I would have wasted 2 or more years and all of the savings I'd accumulated to buy a home. It was just too big a risk. So I made the sad decision to shelve it, but with the intention to build a much smaller scale game, something that, once the core systems were built, I could expand upon. Something that wouldn't take years of level design, something modular. Thus, Project Hades was born. This one was so short-lived that it never even had a funny work-in-progress name. Project Hades was a spin-on Balatro with more room for narrative and a supervillain twist. Instead of playing cards, there were henchmen, instead of jokers, there were artifacts. Instead of the score target, there was the hero and their HP. For a small solo dev, at the time it seemed like a really cool idea that once I got the core of the game built, it would be easy to expand upon at my leisure. Unfortunately, I still wasn't a coder, so I went back to YouTube and found a series of tutorials. Just like last time, this worked at the start. I was building something that would eventually become something fun. I learned about scriptable objects, I had cards, I had a grid where you could place characters that I didn't want in the final game but the tutorial wanted it, so I had it anyway. But then I took some time off to relax after a pretty brutal job rejection, and when I got back I discovered that I was working from a dead tutorial series and I had reached its end, despite the game only being half done. Annoyingly, for whatever reason, the creator had stopped the series and hadn't uploaded anything for a year. I tried to carry on for a single 30-minute session regardless, but as before, I really didn't know what any of my code did, beyond high-level explanations, and I had no idea how to do the things I wanted to do. So once more, the project was dropped and my motivation was shot, leaving me floating for a while. I decided to stop trying and gave up on coding. That was back in April 2025. Despite setbacks, I didn't want to sit idle, I didn't want to just waste away doing nothing, so I worked on tabletop projects where I didn't need to code. Since then, I've released a journaling game on itch.io and I've got to the playtesting phase of a card game, both of which are doing as well as they can be expected for what they are. What they are being niche and unreleased respectively. But video games have always been my first love. So after all that time, and after visiting all my former co-workers at Develop Brighton in July, I found myself back here with an open Unity project and a thirst for vengeance, but also knowledge. In this, my first series on the channel, I'll be chatting about what I've learned, how I learned it, and what I'm doing with it. I'll also discuss whether I found myself at any impasses, and how I overcame them, or why I didn't. I'm beginning by taking a step back from the way I learned before and stepping into a whole new way of learning. Instead of following a single long tutorial series and just building whatever the creator wanted, I've started deciding what I want to see in the game next and learning that. Either by finding a YouTube tutorial or trial and error, or very occasionally giving up and asking ChatGPT what I'm doing wrong. I'm hoping to post every couple of weeks, but it might be close to once a month. Who knows how easy I'll find all this. Just a quick note, I wrote this script a little over a month ago and got sidetracked reorganising my life, and didn't find time until the week before last to start recording these, so I have a few scripts ready to go. So the coding journey stuff is going to talk about 2-week increments, once a week at first, and then we'll see how the actual schedule looks after that. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to follow along with this journey, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.